Hey y'all, thanks for checking out the video. This one I'll show you how I did the profiles and to help accept the panels for the cherry wainscot, and how I built all of this, including this frame here for my arch entry. Stay tuned. Alright, I got a lot of 12-foot stock, so I just went ahead and cut these into rough lengths for the sizes of the panels. I don't like this width. This is something that will definitely tend to cut, especially a board like this one. You see I've got rift sawn and quarter sawn grain on either side, and I'm flat sawn here in the center. So essentially what's going to happen is like the board still wants to be part of a tree. So basically here's the center of the board of the tree, and this board was cut probably somewhere right here just above the juvenile wood. And there's a lot of tension in the board, and it's going to want to curl around towards the center, where the center of the tree used to be. I don't know if it was on the top or the bottom of this board, but you know, it doesn't really matter too much. I haven't looked at the grain orientation to see. But I can tell by the grain patterns that this is rift and quarter sawn, this is flat sawn, and then back to rift and quarter sawn. So I got to minimize whatever movement's going to be in here. So when I've got boards like this, you know, I like to try to split it right down the flat sawn center here. Doesn't always work out, but it helps. Because what I'm doing here is I'm reducing the amount of stress, because once this flat sawn section has been removed, now I've reduced the amount of curl to just this little bit of flat sawn right here on either side of the center. The rift sawn and quarter sawn doesn't tend to want to curl, it just wants to move side to side. Flat sawn wants to almost move in 3 dimensions. So that's kind of my goal here as I'm cutting these. I'm looking for boards that I can, looking for ways that I can reduce the amount of movement in a given board in these panels. Because, you know, this wall is like 23 feet long, so and these panels are going to end up being about 3 feet across each. So, got to start cutting them and try to get rid of whatever stress is in the boards. They've already been straight lined, so I don't necessarily have to go to the jointer. But as I make a cut, what I'm looking for is any movement in the board as I cut it, and what stress shows up. And then I'll go to the jointer, straighten out whatever shows up in the board, and then come back to here to where I'm just making a couple skin cuts against the saw blade so that I got nice parallel and square edges with no hoop-de-hoos. And, you know, and if I have one that tries to turn into a pretzel on me when I do this, then I know I need to reject this particular board, because that stress, if there's that much stress in it when I cut it, then it's going to show up in the panel over time, because the physics, it wants to move, it will, and give it enough time, just like an inmate, it's going to find a way. So as I was making that cut, the two pieces diverged and then came back. So there was a fair amount of stress in this part of the board right here. And if I look down, this board here, when I sight down the board, this board here ended up with a pretty good bow this way. And this board actually stayed straight. So this one bowed, this one didn't move, which I'm not surprised. This is majority rift and quarter. This is, you know, about a third plane saw. So most of the stress was right here around the area that was closest to the pith. So now I'll run these on the jointer, give them a little shave, grab the next board, rinse and repeat. This was about a 15-inch board. And when I first set it up here, it was nice and flat. And I did the same thing that I showed earlier. I cut it right down that plate sawn center. And we got a little bit of twist showed up in this one. This one went crazy. I don't know if you can see how much that's moving. It's a good 1/4 of an inch. That's part of the reason why I do this, is because if there's stress in the board and then the panel moves and that releases that stress over time, then this panel isn't flat on the wall anymore. This panel is trying to be a pretzel. This guy ain't paying for pretzels. He's paying for flat panels. So I'll face joint these, get them flat again, and then I can move forward. Well, I got about 15 panels that I need to glue together for this one wall. My finished dimension is about 35.5-ish inches. So I'm making 17.5 to 18-inch blanks, leaving a little bit of room to join one edge and kind of get my grain going right. Now, I'm not being super picky on the grain type, because well, it's going to get a real dark colored stain on it. So for the most part, all I'm looking for is consistency in color across the boards, and to keep so that I can keep the color consistent across each board. The grain is not going to be hugely defined in this once it gets stained. So and it's pretty straightforward glue ups, just go ahead and glue them all together, nice clean edges, make sure everything closes up, handful of clamps, blah blah blah. Y'all know the routine. But the main thing is, at this point, these are at a heavy 3/4, just shy of 13/16. So I'm not super concerned about how flush they are. They got 2 or 3 passes in the planer left in them. So I'm going to be able to pass them at least once on each side through the planer after I glue these together. So, I've got almost 3/16 to play with, because my finished thickness is going to be 5/8. So there's no reason to get too fussy with how flush they are. Just slop some glue on there and squeeze them together and wait a couple hours and do it again. Type bun 2. Couple rags, and all the fun in the world. All right, now is the fun part. Got my panel blanks. These are all halves of what each panel needs to be. They're at about 13/16 plus or minus, and I got to get them down to 5/8 and then join them together again. So now I've got a fair amount of time of pushing them through the planer. One of the tricks that I do with this kind of thing is I'll leave when I glue these halves, I don't worry about the how flush these panels are, and I'll leave the planer set to the thickness of the finished pieces. Now, because I've got a little bit of ups and downs and a couple of bows and all of the other stuff that panels want to do, this will help kind of flatten it out. And because I have the ups and downs, so far as the planer is concerned, these will probably back up to 7/8, give or take. So first pass is on the original planer setting, and then the second pass I'll start taking some off. These are pretty wide. I got a 20-inch planer, and these are 18 and 19 inches wide. So I may only be able to take a 32nd at a time off. I got to see how willing this cherry is to be thinner. So, yeehaw. So here you can see I have my my full-scale template that I drew out, and these are my panels that will make this arch panel in the end. So what I did is I marked the line because it gets a little confusing once I got it kind of half covered up, so I know where I'm at. And what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I've got this lined up on my center line that I have marked. Then I have some overlap up here, a good half, 3/4 of an inch. And mark that and that so that I know this is my cut. Now that I've done that, I can bring my other piece that I want to bring together with it and transfer those lines over. Now I'm also looking at making sure I have good coverage on my joints over here in all of my directions. So bring these marks over to my cuts. Now I want to put biscuits in here. I want to make sure that my biscuit is well away from the profiles that I'm going to put in here. Now I'm putting one down here. Even though this is going to get cut away, I still want a biscuit in there because that helps keep this section where it's going to be cut nice and flush. And then to make sure that I don't get confused, I mark them all. Alright, when I'm at this stage of the game, I'm deciding what the faces of these are going to be. I'm looking at color and grain and all that other happy stuff a lot more closely. When I was making the Blakes up, I was just kind of ballparking stuff. This gripper, one color and grain pattern, and so on and so forth. So now I'm trying to match these out to where I'm looking at the edges that are going to get joined together and which is the better face. You know, it's not absolutely crucial on this project as much, simply because this customer wanted it stained real dark. I'm afraid that the grain's going to come out kind of muddy. I'm going to try to cheat it as light as I can. To where as much of this grain shows as possible. So part of figuring out which one is the face, I want the face up. I'm not worried about if the clamp leaves any glue marks or anything on the back side. I'm very concerned about it on the face. So to minimize that, I tighten the clamps just enough to start the squeeze out. And I'm letting it sit flat on the clamps in the back. To get the face pretty clean. And then I bring my top clamp in. and I make sure that my top clamp is suspended above I hate this style of clamp, they're a pain. Make sure that the top clamp is suspended above the board so that whatever squeeze out shows up is easy to clean. And the clamp doesn't leave any marks on the face of the board. Might have to get another clamp for this one. It's a little short for this, I fear. There it goes, it's biting now. I'm crunching it down until I start to see a little bit of squeeze out again. That way I know I'm getting good clamp pressure from the top. Bring the bottom ones up to equal pressure. Trying to keep this because from here all that's going to happen to it is sanding. So I want this to be as pretty as possible. So I'll take all the steps to make it pretty. A lot less concerned about the back. Really, I'm just trying to keep the big gunky gunks off of it so it's easier to manage going forward. I won't even sand this back side. These are all the cutters that I'm going to need to do the frames on these styles and rails for these panels. I'm going to have to do some flush trim because I've got a couple of radius pieces. That's what this setup is here. Then I got my cope and stick knives, and then my tongue and groove cutters. The tongue and groove cutters are because I've got some field joints I got to put into this to make these panels manageable for me in the shop, and at the same time, you know, make it to where they're reasonably easy to ship. Yeah. This is my stack of material that's got to all get run through these cutters. I have scribe boards, styles and rails, and all kinds of fun stuff in here. So first up, I'm going to do my tongue and groove cutters. They're the least fragile set of machine joints. So I can start getting this stuff put together, and I can start determining my faces. So we'll get the shaper set up, and we'll do that now. Okay, whenever I'm setting up my tongue and groove cutters, I always start with the groove cutter first, because it's a lot easier. This diameter on this edge right here is actually equal to the tongue that is left behind. So once I get this set to here, my fences are set for both cutters, and then all I got to do is just swap out the heads. So makes life a lot easier. And I got to get it to where it's just kissing the knife here. Right there. Now I can set these fences up like a jointer. As you can see, there's quite a difference in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to where this fence is about a 1/16 of an inch behind this one. Now I can set up my test piece and make sure that it is pulling off about a 1/16, that there's no snipes and everything on the end of the cutter, so that when these guys go to put these joints together out in the field, everything is nice and snug. Snug and bug. Bug and snug. Alright, it's time to set up for the profile for my coping stick. The panel profile for the framing. What it is it's this 3-headed stack thing. Shaper cutter. It's got 3 pieces. And the smallest cutter is the one that I need to set my fences to. This is the way this is the orientation the stack's going to take on the shaper. I like to keep my face side to the floor. That way any variation in an individual board is accounted for. It can be to the back side where it's not seen. What I think is one of the cool things about it is that the opposite set is they're timed to each other, just like the tongue and groove knives that I showed you earlier are, to where once I set the fence, then everything is, I don't have to adjust it again. Except I will have to, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be setting up these fences like a jointer again, so that I can take off any imperfections in the cut, because these are straight out the table saw and they're long. The shorter ones I'm not so worried about, but these longer ones I am. So my outfeed fence is the one that is going to become my zero fence. It's the one that's not going to be moved. But my infeed fence, I will adjust it. I'll set it up to where the on this, it'll be set up to like a jointer. But when I do my cope, which will be the inverse profile of what I'm about to cut, then my fence, I can't take anything off of the length. My length's got to be just right. And oftentimes what I do, if I have both a cope and a stick profile on a board, then I'll cut my copes first to reduce end grain blowout. But these boards, these long ones, don't have any cope cuts on them on the end grain. So I'll just run these now. And this also kind of helps set my zero to where as I go forward, I've got some reference pieces to work from. So that's the short version of all of this. Now I got to take the 15-20 minutes it takes to set these fences correctly and run a test piece to confirm that I've got it like I want it. All right, well, that's this. Here's what this produced. I got my profile and my groove, just like on a tongue and groove floor. And same thing here, except I got a tongue. And what that produces is my field joint, to where now I can have a panel here and a panel over here, and this is a way to separate them and ship them. And then when it's time to assemble them on location, they just kind of pop right together. And what I'll do, these are pretty flush, but as I build these panels, I'll have panel A, panel B, so on and so forth. I'll pull them together, hold them together with a clamp, and I'll sand these faces together to make sure that all of this stays nice and flush all the way through the process. Only thing I can't do is pull them together and then spray them, because physics. It doesn't like me doing stuff like that. Stuff, it gets ugly quick. But by keeping it pulled together and doing all of my sanding, I'll reduce how much of the butt crack appearance that I'll get in this joint is going to be there because of because I got to put a film finish on the top of this. But this should minimize it to where it'll be only lightly noticeable, I hope. So now I get to start cutting the copes on the end, so I can have a complete frame on either side. Pretty cool. All right, whenever you got a shaper, one of the drawbacks to it is the fences are not they're not indexed to your miter gauge. It's because this is probably the least used operation, so having an index to that is not required. Good news is that with time and using the same cutters over and over again, you get wear patterns, so I could get this pretty close to where I want it to be. So far as where this fence needs to be and everything else. But I still have to take the time to make sure that these are parallel to my miter gauge and that my miter gauge is square to my fences. And I've done all of that little tedious picking work. So now I'm ready to check and make sure that my fences are aligned to my cutter. So, and that's also real tedious work. Okay, these are going to be my arch rails that go above the door jambs and below the panel. So I've got everything square right now, and you can see I left the bottom completely full instead of doing the staggered joint pieces going together, and that's because I need something. I need to have it to where I could do the joinery on the ends of the boards. I just got them cut to length. If I had done the staggered thing to try to use less material in the end, I would have no good way of setting it up on the miter gauge and stuff like that, because it would just be too small. So, do your joinery and make your joinery as easy as possible before you make the piece all weird shaped. While it's still square, it's easy to do your joinery. When it's round, the rules change. Okay, now I need to get a little creative. This is my rub collar setup. This is my pattern cutter that you've been seeing me using. And this rub collar is the same size, so it essentially makes it into a flush trim bit. This is my stack for cutting the profile on those. And as you can see, it is the same size. This outer diameter of this cutter is the same diameter as my rub collar. The problem with that is this is my actual cut on this cutter. The difference between the two from here to there is 3/8 of an inch. So I've got to modify my template now that I have all of these sized. The easy way to do that, take this 3/8 rabbiting bit, chuck it up in my router, and go around the outside edge of the template, and then come back and flush trim it. And that's it. That takes that 3/8 of an inch off of that outer edge. Then I can take and reattach my blank to the template and just flush it to the back of the template that I've already cut it to fit to, and it should go right on around and give me a nice clean cut around the face. The router left the edge a little bit ugly. Just run across the edge sander real fast. Take the fuzz off. Something that I had to do here. If you look closely on here, there's a little ridge. Kind of hard to show on the camera. There's a little ridge on the top of this. And what that's meant to do is hold the bearing away from this cutter so the bearing can spin freely. This cutter does not have that ridge on it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get it on. It wants the cutter wants to crash against the face of the bearing. So what I've done is I took several layers of painter's tape, set it on there, and now my bearing can turn freely without rubbing on these cutters and damaging them. And you can see the 3/8 difference that I'm trying to account for here. Okay, what I've done here is I've kind of mimicked what's going on with the radius template. This is the same thickness but stock. It is cut 3/8 of an inch narrower than my setup piece here. I know that this material was milled at the same time, so it's the same thickness. So I can use this piece to dial in what's going on with the cutting, make sure that my theory is right, and if I'm getting a good full cut, then I'll know I can bring my radius piece up to this. you can see, full contact, nice and flush here. So I know that now I can take my radius template and put it on. Alright y'all, here's my mock-up. These aren't the actual pieces that are going to go here, but they're profiled the same way. So you can see how all of this is supposed to fit together. My casing, down below here, this is my arched opening, and the casing and jam setup fit inside of here. The casing itself is supposed to overlap this by 1 inch. What I've done is I've marked a couple of spots around the radius for that 1 inch coverage. So all I've got to do is bring this around to where it's on that 1 inch line. Now you can see how all of this is supposed to interact. So now I have my groove here that my arched panel will fit in top of here, and then down below here, this is where the that'll be all open inside. So I think that's going to do it for this video, y'all. Like, subscribe, share, and all that fun stuff, and I hope you got something out of this that you could use. Thanks for watching.